Okay, so we've talked about the importance of understanding team development and where they're at and the type of behaviors that we would observe and how we would respond to those behaviors. We now want to think about how we align the team up so that everybody has clear understanding of what the team is trying to achieve and what each person's individual role within that team is. And this is where performance planning comes into place or into action. So, performance planning is the idea of articulating in a manner in which it's clear to everybody what we're trying to do as a team and what each individual's role within that is in terms of their actions and their contributions. So, in essence, the idea of a performance plan is that we set a performance plan for the team, and then we sit down as a manager, we sit down individually with each person in that team and identify the role that they play in achieving that. And that should be done in a collaborative manner. So, think of it this way as a frontline manager or a middle manager, my manager would sit down with me and say, Tony, this is what I am trying to achieve in my role. So these are our team's goals. This is the role that you and your team will play within that. And then my manager and I will set performance plans in place for me as a member of their team. So that's my chunk or my piece out of their pie. Then I take that piece of the pie or that chunk, and I sit down with my team and I do the same thing. So I'm my role is to have overall responsibility for a part of the business, and then my team will have a particular part of that responsibility that will fall under their responsibility. So performance planning helps us to make sure we've got some type of objective and transparent and non ambiguous way of doing that so that everybody is clear about what we're trying to achieve and what their role is within that. Basically, going back to the concept of in team sports, this is what the team's trying to achieve, and as a position player, this is my position and this is what I need to do. They're most useful when everyone's clear about what that is, and that's the role of performance planning. So performance planning should occur on a regular basis. Now, depending on the nature of your business, whether it's kind of a stable work environment in terms of the things that you do and the goals that you have to achieve as a business and as a team and as an individual, or whether it's more dynamic and in a constant state of flux, you would have to, depending on whether it's it's consistent and more static, or whether it's in a constant state of flux. Depending on those factors would depend how we do the performance plans. But the concepts and principles still remain the same. Everybody needs to be clear of what we're trying to do and how we go about that. So the most traditional, if I talk about traditional approach, a most traditional approach is similar to what I explained before or described before in terms of my manager sitting down with me, and we would do that in either a 6 or a 12 monthly cycle. Most commonly, 12 months, we sit down, we do a 12 monthly cycle. Once in every 12 months, we'd sit down and my manager shares with me their goals, and then I talk to them about how I feel myself and the team could contribute to that. And then we would also discuss if I have any other individual type goals that I want to add to that. So it might be, innovative ideas or some type of um, new process or new area that I want to implement, or something that I would like to expand. I would add to that. Of course, it still needs to fit in with the overall organization and team's objectives, but I can also contribute some of my own personal objectives within that, as well as supporting my manager's objectives. So we would do that. Maybe let's just imagine at the start of the new financial year. So in July, sometime, we would sit down and we would have a discussion or multiple discussions around that, and we would put it down in some type of document. And the document might look like something like this, where we would have my name and my department and my supervisor's name, and we would write down the list of goals, timelines around that, action steps to complete those goals, and we would identify things such as resources. They might be people or money, um, and we would also think about what would be the metrics that we would measure by and how we would review and monitor those. Um, and we would do that, say in July, and we would set down a 6 monthly review period. So maybe in February, January or February, we might sit down and say, let's catch up again and see how we're going against our goals and our action plans and timelines and so forth, and review them and see whether we need to make any adjustments. It might be to the goals themselves or to the resources required or whatever it may be. So we would do a review at the halfway point, 6 month point, and then we would come back at the end of the 12-month cycle, back in July, and we would review the past 12 months, and then we would set new performance plans for the next 12 months. And that's pretty much the principle of what we're trying to achieve. That's me and my manager. And then I would go away. So after, let's go back to the start of that cycle. In July, I would go, when I sit down with my manager and do my performance plan, I would then sit down with each of my team members. And depending on, again, the workplace and nature of the workplace, they might be your key team members. In other workplaces, it might be all your team members, including your casual team members as well, or those who are on contract and so forth. But we would do the same thing. So I'd sit down, set my performance plan with my manager, get that signed off, and then I would sit down with my team and say, okay, this is what I've signed off with my manager. These are our team goals. How are we going to contribute to that? What are you going to contribute to that? And then what else would you like to do? And then include those personal goals in there. Have those conversations about including those personal goals in there as well. So we start to see this cascading through the organization of alignment of goals and behaviors to drive those organizational goals and then the goals at each level of the organization. So if we can imagine this occurring all the way through the organization, where the most senior manager sits down with their next line of managers, then that next line of managers sit down with their next line of managers, and so forth, and we're part of that, so that we all working towards the same goal and we're all contributing towards that goal. Now that's the traditional model that you would have in a large organization, something like a government organization or something similar, or multinational, where it's the environment's a little bit more stable, perhaps not as much change and flux. Some industries, though, are uh, a lot more dynamic, in a sense that the environment is always changing. So, doing a 12-month performance plan in a traditional sense, investing a lot of time in sitting down and writing these documents, getting them signed off, and then doing with each of your team members, might not be worth it if the environment changes every couple of months. And it might be that we're in a particular industry where it's very dynamic and we have to be very responsive, and and goals and objectives are far more uh, shorter time periods than the traditional model I just demonstrated or explained. So in that case, we would still adapt the same principles, because the principles we know from the research and from things like Tuckman's model, that direction is really critical, and everybody needs to know what role they play. But the way we do it is got to be far more responsive, or else we're just too slow and not responsive enough. We'll be very much behind the eight ball if we do that. So what we want to do is think about ways of adapting that, and that might be more in terms of something like a project management methodology, where we identify what our goals are, and then use more of the project management tools, such as regular stand-up meetings and scrums and so forth, to set clear short-term goals. Everybody has an understanding of where they fit within that, and is clear about their role is within that, and then we're monitoring that progress as we go along. Um, Same type of principles: setting clear goals, setting um, uh, clear expectations, and getting that buy-in in terms of the role that everybody plays, but then also doing that monitoring and reviewing to making sure we're on track. So our plans might not necessarily be quite as rigid as the other ones, but we still have some type of planning process, and the tools that we use might be far more flexible depending on what we're doing. And that's the role that performance plans play within that. And this diagram here illustrates those cycles of where you go from stage one, the performance planning, to stage two, the monitoring and developing, stage three, the performance development review, and then four, the rewards and recognition. Which I didn't mention that actually. That's as part of that performance cycle. Um, Many organizations tie in that at the end of the cycle, depending on your performance against your goals and objectives that you set out 12 months or 6 months earlier. Um, Depending on your performance, it would depend on things like your salary review for the your annual salary review, or things like bonuses and rewards and so forth. It's tied into those performance plans. And of course, the other thing that I wanted to raise here is something that we've touched in previous units. Just to recap from, for example, the operational planning unit, where this was covered off in quite a bit of detail, is making sure that we incorporate things such as our key result areas, our critical success factors, or our KPIs. Um, and if you don't remember that or not sure about that, just go back to have a look at some of those uh, tutorial videos on that. But just making sure that we incorporate those key result areas or KPIs within our plan, so that again we're all focused on those success factors, and we all understand what our performance metric is within that. And that really just gives everyone good, clear direction and clarity about what we're trying to do.